Power has a sound. I learned that the moment I stepped into Unity Citadel, the heart of the Galactic Council. It wasn't the roar of engines or the voices of admirals. It was silence, the kind that settled over thousands of delegates whenever one of the ancient empires entered the chamber. I stood beside Earth's ambassador, one of the youngest representatives in a hall filled with civilizations older than human history itself. Our place was near the back, close enough to observe, far enough to remind everyone we were still newcomers. Then the great doors opened. The Astralis delegation entered in white and silver uniforms, every step perfectly synchronized. But something was wrong. I counted them twice. The Emperor was absent. So was the Empress. There wasn't a single member of the imperial family. Around me, whispers spread faster than any official announcement. For the first time, even the oldest species looked uneasy. I had the feeling I was watching the beginning of something that would change the galaxy forever. The speaker waited until every conversation had faded before activating the central hologram. A rotating image of the Astralis Empire appeared above the chamber, its borders glowing across hundreds of star systems. Normally, the sight inspired confidence. Today it carried a different weight. Several frontier sectors flashed crimson, followed by warning symbols that spread like cracks through polished glass. The silence returned, heavier than before. Delegates, the speaker began, we have confirmed multiple reports of coordinated uprisings within Astralis territory. A wave of uneasy whispers swept through the chamber. 3 border governors have declared independence. 4 noble houses have mobilized private fleets without imperial authorization. Civilian communications from 12 colonies have ceased. My stomach tightened. This was no isolated disturbance. It was the beginning of something much larger. The hologram shifted again, displaying dozens of military formations gathering near disputed borders. Neighboring empires had already noticed the weakness. Some fleets claimed they were conducting exercises. Others insisted they were protecting trade routes. No one in the chamber believed those excuses. They were waiting for the Astralis Empire to collapse. If it did, every ambitious ruler in the galaxy would race to seize its worlds before anyone else could. There is one additional matter, the speaker continued. His voice became quieter, forcing every delegate to listen. Our investigators have found no verifiable evidence that a surviving member of the imperial family currently governs the empire. A collective gasp echoed through the chamber. Even species incapable of showing emotion shifted uneasily in their seats. Beside me, Ambassador Carter folded his hands without speaking, but I noticed his knuckles whitening. If the rightful heir has indeed perished, the speaker said, the succession laws of Astralis become disputed. Under such circumstances, civil war is considered statistically unavoidable. Those final words lingered long after he stopped speaking. I looked toward the silent Astralis delegation. None of them objected. None denied the report. They simply remained motionless, their expressions carefully controlled. Somehow, that frightened me far more than panic would have. I watched the chamber carefully as the speaker yielded the floor to any delegation willing to offer a solution. None spoke. The silence stretched until it became uncomfortable. Ancient powers that had negotiated the end of countless wars suddenly had nothing to say. Then Ambassador Daniel Carter rose from Earth's modest seat near the back of the hall. A few delegates glanced toward him with polite curiosity. Humanity had earned a reputation for honesty, disaster relief, and mediation, but not for shaping the destiny of empires. We were still the newest significant member of the Council, a species barely beginning to understand galactic politics. No one expected our voice to matter today. I stood as protocol required while Carter walked toward the central platform with the same calm expression he wore during trade negotiations and humanitarian briefings. He waited until the chamber settled before speaking. Empires rarely fall because they lose their armies. His quiet voice carried effortlessly through the enormous hall. Every delegate looked at him. Even the Astralis ministers raised their eyes. Carter continued without changing his tone. They fall when they forget how ordinary people should be treated. I felt hundreds of confused stares move between the ambassador and the crimson hologram hanging above the chamber. The statement sounded almost absurd beside reports of fleets, conspiracies, and possible civil war. Several translators even repeated it twice, as if believing they had misunderstood the original words. Carter offered no further explanation. He simply folded his hands behind his back and waited. The silence that followed was unlike the respectful silence that greeted powerful empires. It was the silence of people trying to decide whether they had just heard remarkable wisdom or unbelievable naivety. From where I stood, I could see members of the Astralis delegation exchange the first genuine expressions of the entire session. They were brief, almost impossible to notice, yet unmistakable. One elderly minister slowly lowered his head, as though those simple words had struck closer to the truth than every strategic report presented that day. Several delegates were the first to break the silence. The representative of the Karth Dominion rose so abruptly that his ceremonial robes swept across the polished floor. With respect, Ambassador, he said, empires survive because they command superior fleets, not because they concern themselves with the feelings of laborers. A chorus of approving voices answered him. Another delegate, an elderly senator from the Valari Confederation, inclined her head before adding, royal blood preserves stability. Remove the dynasty, and no amount of kindness can prevent ambitious nobles from seizing power. Around the chamber, more representatives joined the debate. Strength deters rebellion. War is decided by logistics. History belongs to those with the largest armies. Their arguments echoed beneath the crystal dome until they blended into a wall of confident certainty. I glanced toward Ambassador Carter. He listened without interruption, his expression unchanged. He neither defended himself nor challenged the growing criticism. Somehow that quiet composure irritated several delegates even more than his original statement. A tall diplomat from the Dravian Collective gave a short, dismissive laugh. Humanity has existed on the Council for scarcely a generation. You have admirable compassion, Ambassador, but governing an empire requires realities your species has yet to experience. Scattered laughter followed. It was not cruel, merely convinced. Most of those present genuinely believed humans still viewed the galaxy through the hopeful eyes of newcomers. They respected our relief missions after disasters. They appreciated our willingness to mediate disputes. Yet none imagined we possessed any meaningful insight into the survival of civilizations that had endured for thousands of years. I felt heat rising in my face, but Carter simply offered a courteous nod. Perhaps, he replied, time has a way of judging every opinion fairly. His answer puzzled the chamber even more than his first remark. The debate quickly returned to military alliances, succession laws, and projected casualty estimates. Within minutes, humanity's contribution had been quietly dismissed. Yet I couldn't shake the feeling that the oldest ambassador in our delegation had spoken less to the council than to someone who was not even present in the room. Council business moved on with mechanical precision, but almost no one was paying attention anymore. Delegates still debated fleet deployments, emergency sanctions, and evacuation corridors, yet every discussion eventually drifted back to the Astralis Empire. I remained at my station, recording notes I suspected no one would ever read. Across the chamber, the Imperial delegation sat as motionless as statues. They neither defended themselves nor appealed for assistance. That silence unsettled me more than any desperate plea could have. An empire that had ruled for millennia now behaved like a patient refusing to admit the wound was fatal. When the session finally recessed, the Great Hall erupted into dozens of private conversations. Diplomats gathered in small circles, lowering their voices as they exchanged rumors that had already spread through half the station. Some claimed the emperor had died months earlier. Others insisted the royal family had been assassinated during an internal coup. A few whispered that a surviving heir existed but had disappeared before loyal forces could reach them. No one possessed evidence. Everyone possessed certainty. I followed Ambassador Carter through the long crystal corridor overlooking the stars. Before I could ask what he truly believed, He stopped beside one of the observation windows. Thousands of ships moved around Unity Citadel like glowing insects, each carrying representatives from civilizations that believed themselves masters of history. They laughed, I said quietly. They did. They dismissed everything you said. They dismissed it because they heard only the words, he replied. Not the warning behind them. I frowned. Do you really think an empire can survive simply by treating ordinary people better? He looked at the endless sea of stars before answering. No empire survives simply because of kindness. But every empire that forgets the people who feed it, build it, and believe in it eventually begins to rot from within. Armies only reveal the decay. They never create it. Before I could respond, my communicator vibrated with an incoming priority alert. A transport from Earth had just arrived at Greenhaven Station, one of our largest agricultural colonies beyond the Council's core worlds. At first glance it seemed routine. Looking back, I would remember that message as the moment history quietly changed forever. Greenhaven Station never appeared in political discussions at the Galactic Council. It produced grain, vegetables, fruit, and livestock for dozens of nearby systems, and that was enough. While ancient empires argued over borders and fleets, ordinary people there worried about harvest schedules, irrigation pumps, and cargo departures. That was exactly why I had chosen to leave Earth 3 years earlier. I wanted a life where the most difficult decision of the day involved weather forecasts instead of diplomacy. Every morning began the same way. I walked through endless rows of hydroponic fields before sunrise, greeting workers already tending the crops. Humans, Bellari, Kesson, and half a dozen other species worked side by side without caring where anyone had been born. Plants ignored politics. They only cared whether someone remembered to water them. Among the quietest members of my crew was Maya. She had arrived almost 2 years earlier carrying little more than a travel bag and forged employment papers. She claimed to be from a forgotten colony damaged by pirates, and no one questioned the story. Plenty of refugees passed through Greenhaven looking for honest work and a chance to disappear from whatever tragedy they had escaped. Maya rarely spoke unless someone addressed her directly. She avoided celebrations, never discussed her family, and politely refused every invitation to join us after work. Even so, everyone liked her. She worked harder than anyone else, treated every person with respect, and somehow remembered the names of every child living on the station. I often caught her standing alone near the Eastern Observation Dome after sunset, staring into space as if searching for something only she could see. Whenever I asked whether everything was all right, she always answered with the same small smile. I am just enjoying the quiet. At the time, I believed her. I had no reason not to. If someone had told me that the quiet young woman pruning fruit trees beside me was the most wanted person in the Astralis Empire, I would have laughed and gone back to checking irrigation lines. Some secrets were simply too enormous for ordinary minds to imagine. The news from the Council reached Greenhaven 3 days later, carried by cargo captains long before the official broadcasts arrived. Every version of the story was different, but they all ended the same way. The Astralis Empire was breaking apart. Some believed the Emperor had been murdered. Others claimed rival noble houses had already begun gathering private fleets beyond the reach of imperial law. Whether the rumors were true no longer mattered. Fear had already started doing its work. I didn't waste time debating politics. Food shortages always arrived before armies. That afternoon I called every department supervisor into the operations center and spread the station maps across the conference table. Increasing emergency reserves, I said. Double the grain storage, triple the preserved food supplies. I want every shelter inspected and fully stocked before the end of the week. One of the engineers frowned. Jake, Greenhaven is hundreds of light years from the Imperial frontier. I know. Then why prepare for war? I looked around the room before answering. Because hungry people don't care where a war started. No one argued after that. Within hours the entire station shifted into quiet preparation. Storage silos filled faster than scheduled. Medical inventories were expanded. Water recycling systems received long overdue upgrades. Maintenance crews reinforced underground shelters that hadn't been opened in years. To most workers it looked like careful planning. To me it was simple common sense. Only one person seemed unusually nervous. Maya. I noticed her watching every arriving transport with growing concern. Whenever an unfamiliar ship entered orbit, she found an excuse to leave whatever she was doing and disappear for several minutes. Her calm smile remained, but something behind it had changed. She listened before speaking, glanced over her shoulder far too often, and never stayed alone in open areas after dark. One evening I found her standing outside the main greenhouse, staring toward the stars with an expression I had never seen before. "You've been expecting someone," I said quietly. She froze for the briefest moment. Then she forced another gentle smile. I was hoping I was wrong. It wasn't the answer I expected. It was the answer of someone who already knew that sooner or later, the past always finds you. 3 nights later, Greenhaven Station was quieter than I had ever known it. The last cargo shuttle had departed before sunset. The processing plants had switched to automated operation, and most of the workers were already asleep. I was finishing maintenance reports in my office when every light on the station flickered once. The interruption lasted less than a second, but it was enough to make me look toward the security monitor. Our long-range sensors had gone offline. That wasn't an accident. Before I could reach the communications panel, the emergency sirens erupted throughout the colony. Security breach. Unauthorized vessels approaching. All personnel proceed to designated shelters. The calm synthetic voice repeated the warning over and over. Outside the window, flashes of blue light streaked across the night sky as several small craft descended through the atmosphere without requesting landing clearance. They weren't cargo ships. They weren't military either. They moved too fast, too quietly. Mercenaries. I grabbed the emergency radio and ran into the corridor. Workers were already hurrying toward the underground shelters exactly as we had practiced during evacuation drills. Fear spread quickly, but panic hadn't taken hold yet. Then the first explosion shook the station. The blast came from the eastern docking platform. Another followed only seconds later. Whoever had attacked us wasn't targeting warehouses or power generators. They ignored the fuel depots, the communication arrays, even the central administration building. Their assault teams moved with a single purpose. They were searching for someone. I rounded the corner leading toward the greenhouse complex and nearly collided with Maya. Her face had turned pale, and for the first time since I had known her, the calm mask had completely disappeared. "They found me," she whispered. Before I could ask what she meant, armed figures emerged at the far end of the corridor. Their armor carried no insignias, and their weapons were set to lethal power. The leader pointed directly at Maya. "There she is." Without thinking, I caught her wrist. "This way." Questions could wait. Bullets could not. I pulled her through a maintenance door hidden behind the irrigation control room. Few people even remembered the old service tunnels beneath Greenhaven. I had helped repair them years earlier. If we reached them first, we still had a chance. Behind us, heavy boots thundered through the corridor. They weren't here for the station. They were here for Maya. The maintenance tunnel swallowed us in darkness the moment I sealed the hatch behind us. Only the narrow emergency strips along the floor cast enough light to reveal rusted pipes and abandoned service lines. My pulse hammered in my ears as we hurried deeper beneath the station. Above us, distant explosions echoed through the metal framework, followed by muffled bursts of automatic fire. Greenhaven had never been built for war. Every sound reminded me of that. We reached an old junction where 4 tunnels met. I finally stopped and turned toward Maya. She leaned against the wall, struggling to steady her breathing. The composed woman who had worked beside me for 2 years was gone. In her place stood someone carrying a fear that had been growing for far longer than tonight. "They not pirates," she said before I could speak. I figured that much. "They Imperial mercenaries." The words made no sense. Imperial? Why would the Astralis Empire send killers after a farm worker? They wouldn't. She lowered her eyes. But the people who seized control of it would. Silence settled between us. Then she took a slow breath. My name isn't Maya. I stared at her without saying a word. My real name is Maya Solon. The name meant nothing to me for exactly 1 second. Then memory caught up. Every news report, every rumor from the council, every whispered conversation about the missing royal family. I felt the blood drain from my face. The crown princess. She nodded once. I escaped the night the palace fell. Loyal officers helped me disappear before the conspirators could find me. They forged new documents and scattered those who remained faithful across the empire. I was told never to reveal who I was. Not unless there was no other choice. And tonight, they finally found me. She closed her eyes for a moment. I never wanted this to become your problem, Jake. I looked back toward the tunnel we had just crossed. Somewhere above us, people I considered family were still in danger. Then I looked at the frightened woman standing in front of me. Not a princess, not an heir, just Maya, my friend. I don't care who your parents are, I said quietly. They came here to hurt someone under my roof. I picked up the emergency flashlight and faced the tunnel ahead. So now they my problem too. For several seconds neither of us moved. The distant gunfire continued above our heads, each burst vibrating through the tunnel walls. Somewhere behind us, the mercenaries were still searching every corridor, convinced they had cornered their prey. They had no idea the old maintenance network stretched beneath nearly half the colony. I switched off the flashlight and listened. They sealed the exits, I whispered. They know Imperial escape procedures. Maya nodded. They expect me to head for the landing pads or the communication center. They need me alive. If I die before they can prove my identity, their employers gain nothing. That gives us one advantage. She looked at me. They expect us to stay underground. We continued through the narrow passage until we reached an abandoned maintenance depot. Years earlier the room had stored spare irrigation pumps. Now it contained little more than dust, empty shelving, and an emergency terminal that still drew power from an independent circuit. I activated the console. The security network answered immediately. Red warning symbols covered nearly every sector of Greenhaven. The mercenaries had split into organized teams, bypassing warehouses and processing plants exactly as Maya had predicted. They ignored valuable equipment worth fortunes on the black market. Every movement centered on residential districts and staff facilities. They were hunting one person. No one else mattered. Then another signal appeared. Unknown vessels had emerged from faster-than-light travel at the edge of the system. Unlike the attackers, these ships transmitted Imperial military identification codes. Dozens of them. A secure emergency channel opened across the screen. This is Captain Arlen Voss of the Astralis Imperial Guard. Any loyal personnel receiving this transmission, respond immediately. We have confirmed the location of Her Imperial Highness. Hold your position. Rescue units are en route. Maya closed her eyes. They came. You know them? I know that code. For the first time since the attack began, hope appeared in her voice. I checked the tactical display again. The Imperial Guard would reach Greenhaven in minutes. The mercenaries would reach our hiding place long before that. I quietly chambered another round into the emergency rifle. If they want more time, I said, looking toward the tunnel entrance, they're going to have to get through me first. Maya opened her mouth to object. I simply smiled. There isn't enough time to argue. I dragged 2 heavy storage cabinets across the entrance to the maintenance depot and wedged them beneath the reinforced hatch. They wouldn't stop trained soldiers forever, but they might buy us a few precious minutes. Right now, minutes were worth more than weapons. Maya watched me in silence. You don't have to do this, she said softly. They kill you. I tightened the last locking bar before looking back at her. They probably try. Jake, I told you already. You, my friend. Her eyes searched my face as though trying to understand something completely foreign. You know who I am now. I know. You know what protecting me could cost. I do. She lowered her head. In the Empire, thousands have died because they remained loyal to my family. I shrugged. I am not loyal to your family. She frowned. I am loyal to you. For the first time since we had met, tears filled her eyes. She quickly wiped them away before I could pretend not to notice. The motion tracker suddenly flashed. 3 contacts, then 6, then 12. They found the tunnel, I muttered. A metallic clang echoed through the passage. Someone was testing the hatch. A calm voice followed. Princess Maya Solon. The speaker sounded almost polite. There is no reason for anyone else to die tonight. I raised the rifle without answering. You have been abandoned by those who claim to protect you, the voice continued. The Imperial Guard will arrive too late. Open the door, and the farmer will be spared. Maya took 1 step forward. I blocked her path. No, they'll kill you. They were always planning to. The first breaching charge detonated. The reinforced hatch shuddered violently, scattering dust from the ceiling. A second explosion followed only moments later. The locking bar bent inward. I checked the rifle magazine. Not enough ammunition. Not even close. Then the emergency terminal chimed again. Long-range sensors detected dozens of new hyperspace signatures entering the system. The Imperial Guard had arrived. Outside, the sound of heavy weapons suddenly erupted across Greenhaven Station. The mercenaries hesitated. Their commander barked new orders through the corridor. I smiled despite myself. Here. Maya looked toward the trembling hatch. So are they. The final locking bracket snapped with a sharp crack. The door began to open. I stepped forward and raised my rifle. If those few remaining minutes were all I could give her, then every single second would count. The hatch burst inward with a deafening crash, sending twisted metal skidding across the concrete floor. I fired before the dust had settled. The first mercenary dropped instantly. The second threw himself behind the shattered doorway, and the narrow tunnel erupted with blinding flashes of plasma fire. The confined passage worked in my favor. Only 2 attackers could advance at once, forcing the rest to wait behind them. It wasn't a battle I could win. It was a battle I only needed to delay. Move, I shouted without looking back. Follow the emergency conduit. It leads to the Northern Service elevator. I am not leaving you. You are. Another bolt slammed into the wall beside my head, showering the room with molten fragments. I ducked behind an overturned storage cabinet and fired again. Someone screamed in the darkness. Your Highness. A mercenary called through the smoke. The coup is finished. There is no empire left to save. Surrender, and your death will be quick. Maya stepped beside me despite my order. Lying. I know. No, she whispered. Lying to themselves. Her voice was calm again. The frightened servant had disappeared. The woman beside me spoke with quiet authority, and for the first time I understood that royalty wasn't clothing or titles. It was something carried inside. A violent explosion echoed somewhere above us, powerful enough to shake the entire station. Then another. The attackers hesitated. Their communicators burst into frantic chatter. Imperial Guard breach. Sector 4 has fallen. They lost the landing zone. The mercenary commander cursed and ordered his troops forward anyway. He understood what I did. If they failed now, they would never get another chance. The corridor filled with gunfire once more. My rifle clicked empty. I reached for my sidearm just as armored figures appeared behind the mercenaries. White armor, silver insignias, the Astralis Imperial Guard. Their arrival was swift, disciplined, and absolute. Within seconds the tunnel became a storm of precision fire. Mercenaries who had hunted us only moments earlier were forced into a desperate retreat. Some surrendered, others never had the opportunity. An officer removed his helmet and immediately dropped to one knee before Maya. Your Imperial Highness, he said, lowering his head. We have come to bring you home. Only then did I finally allow myself to believe we had survived. The weeks that followed changed far more than the fate of the Astralis Empire. Every major news network replayed the recording of Maya's speech before the Imperial Senate. Military academies analyzed the defense of Greenhaven Station, not because I had defeated an army, but because I had chosen to stand beside a friend after learning she was the most valuable person in the Empire. Political commentators struggled to explain why a human farmer would risk everything for someone who could offer nothing in return at the time. Across the galaxy, civilizations that had once dismissed humanity as idealistic newcomers quietly began questioning their own assumptions. Soon afterward, an official delegation from Astralis arrived on Earth. They carried gifts beyond imagination. Vast fortunes, noble titles, exclusive trade agreements, unrestricted access to imperial markets, and a permanent military alliance guaranteeing Earth's security for generations. The offer filled hundreds of pages and bore the seal of the new imperial government. Ambassador Daniel Carter listened without interruption. When the Imperial Chancellor finished reading the proposal, Carter smiled politely and closed the document. "Earth is honored by your generosity," he said. "But friendship cannot be purchased." The chamber fell silent. "We did not protect Princess Maya because she would one day become Empress." He paused before continuing. "We protected her because it was the right thing to do." Those words spread across the galaxy almost as quickly as Maya's own speech. Months later, Maya Solon was crowned Empress of Astralis. Her first decrees ended the civil conflict, dismantled the conspiracy that had nearly destroyed the empire, and introduced reforms that restored trust between the throne and ordinary citizens. Her second act was to sign the strongest alliance in imperial history with Earth. As for Greenhaven Station, little changed for those who lived there. The crops still needed tending, harvests still followed the seasons, and life continued as it always had. Yet visitors soon arrived from every corner of known space, hoping to see the quiet colony where history had turned without anyone realizing it. I always told them the same thing. It wasn't the place that changed the galaxy. It was a choice. Centuries later, while studying the final years of the Astralis civil crisis, I found an old record written by a Valari historian. It contained no grand speeches, no lists of famous admirals, and no praise for mighty fleets. Only a single observation remained preserved in the imperial archives. We believed empires were shaped by emperors, senators, and armies. We were wrong. The Astralis Empire survived because its lost princess spent years living as an ordinary maid among ordinary people. A human never cared about her crown. He cared about the frightened woman standing before him. History remembers rulers. The galaxy survived because one farmer remembered a friend. Even now, those words are engraved at Greenhaven Station, where travelers from countless worlds come to remember the quiet place where the fate of an empire changed. Not through power, but through compassion.